You're watching or listening to Strangers in Space, and for the next few minutes, we are going to be talking about Mel Gibson, so you don't have to. Hi, I'm JR.
Hi, I'm Matt.
And I'm John.
So, okay, I've got the bad joke out of the way, the obvious bad joke, right? Okay, so
is that the Mel Gibson instead of Millie?
Yeah,
because and you're going to be insisting on saying Corro instead of Corrie, which the entire country says Corrie apart from you.
Okay, here's the thing, Matt. When I was a teenager, and before Coronation Street was something that I really had any kind of awareness of, other than it was something that was on the channel that I didn't really ever watch anyway, and it was a soap opera, so there were two reasons for me not to watch it. I used to work at an amusement arcade on the seafront, and we would get people from all over the country, and sometimes those people would come in and be quite regulars, and you'd get quite friendly with them. And there were a couple from Manchester who were in their late teens or early 20s. And because they were from Manchester, they just talked about whatever Manchester things were going on. The Smiths, I think, were just on their way up. Actually, they were big fans of Simply Red. And this was in the very early days of Simply Red, when they were still considered, you know, quite an interesting band before they went bland. And they always talked about this program that was made just around the corner from where they lived. And they abbreviated it to Cora, because Cora is short for Coronation Street, not Corrie. Corrie was an invention of the tabloids in the late 80s or early 90s. It was just laziness and ignorance.
Since become universally accepted as the abbreviation of
Well, it's become universally accepted everywhere except Manchester, where they still talk about Cora.
Okay.
We're all victims of the tabloids. That's all we can say.
But it's just laziness from a journalist who couldn't be bothered to find out what the actual nickname for the programme was. But anyway, the point I'm making, Matt, is yes, the reason I call it Cora is because I, for many years, didn't realise there was an alternative. So I just abbreviated it to Cora. And once you've got something in your head, it's very hard not to. You know what I mean? Plus, of course, I don't know. I just find Cora much easier, much trippy, off the tongueier than Corrie. To say Corrie, you have to kind of lean into both vowel sounds, whereas Cora just comes out real easy. So, okay. Should we actually talk about something else, though, instead?
How about we talk about Mel Gibson here?
Well, before we do, though, let's just have a quick word about the manner of the announcement, because last time it was Instagram and everybody was saying, ooh, how modern. They've leaned into Instagram for the announcement. And then this time they've gone back to announcing it on the telly. I mean, did either of you did it even strike you that they'd sort of done something different? Or was it just, because for me, it was just so much that they've always announced things on the telly that I didn't even bat an eyelid. And it wasn't until we were sitting down to do this recording that I suddenly thought, well, hang on, they've gone, wow, Instagram. And now they've gone, okay, back to the telly.
It felt old school, so it felt like she got the introduction that the Doctor normally gets, and the Doctor got an introduction that the companion normally gets. But I think what it made me realise was, I think certainly in Russell T Davies's mind, the Doctor and the companion are co-leads of the series. So it kind of makes sense that way. And I guess the introductions depended on when the people needed introducing, I suspect, and it must have just dovetailed with something to do on Children in Need, I guess.
Yeah,
it's like, you know, Children Need wanted something from Doctor Who to, you know, to help the evening go. So you know, bring in a few extra quid from the fans. So that works so well. The other thing I think would be that she would be a bigger name than Ncuti Gatwa technically, because Ncuti Gatwa's main success is a Netflix series, and that's not, you know, a general, you know, 5 million a week episode thing. You know, Mel Gibson is coming straight from a soap opera where she's familiar to a lot of viewers. She's got proper cachet. Cora. I'll send you that Cora now soon. But yeah, she's better known. She's gonna have some recognition, even though, you know, I'm not being a Cora fan, I didn't recognise her at all.
I've got to be honest. So Coronation Street is something that I don't watch, but that my partner certainly did. She stopped recently, or not, doesn't watch it as much. Occasionally watches a couple of episodes to catch up. But I would often be in the room when it was on, or passing through or whatever when it was on. So actually, I've seen a lot of Millie Gibson over the course of the last 3 years. And yeah, she's a big part with some major storylines for the last 3 years. So you're absolutely right. The sort of brand recognition with Millie Gibson is way bigger than it would have been with Ncuti Gatwa, because this is a program that's, I mean, even now with the sort of the way viewing figures have gone, there'll still be a certain amount of catch up and stuff. Or, like I say, people like me who are not necessarily watching it, but catching enough of it to sort of vaguely keep up with things that are going on. Should have been seen by 10 million people in this country, I would have thought, at the very least. So yeah, she'll kind of be recognised. But the reason I'm bringing this up is when she walked out of the TARDIS on that stage in the Children in Need thing, I had no idea who I was looking at. And shall I tell you for why? Because in the programme, she plays a sort of 15-year-old. She's made down. And when she walks out of the TARDIS, she's clearly glammed up. And I think she's actually changed a fair bit over the course of the last couple of years as well, which I guess a lot of teenagers probably do. So actually, when it took me going to Google, because they said Coronation Street, and I thought, oh, I don't recognise that from Coronation Street. It took me a few minutes on Google looking at pictures of Coronation Street to work out which part she'd actually been playing. Had either of you seen her in anything before, Matt?
No, I didn't, and I didn't see the announcement either. I saw it on Twitter, and then I watched clips of the announcement. Yeah, because I wasn't going to. It's not. I'm beyond the point where I'll sit through the whole of Children in Need waiting for any Doctor Who bits.
Wise man.
But no, I've never seen her in Coronation Street. I've never seen her in any. She's mainly been in Coronation Street. I was struck by. Well, we'll get onto that.
Okay, yeah, okay then. I'll ask John and then I'll come back for that. John, had you seen her? Have you seen much Corrie? No. There you go. I said it.
It was my grand's favourite series. You know, she watched it in the 80s, and you know, I was exiled to a back room when we were up there and Doctor Who was on. So, you know, no bitterness at all. No, but I did look up a few clips after seeing her, and yeah, I was quite impressed. The thing about the announcement as well is it was sort of quite muffled, because I think it was Jason Manford said who she was, and you couldn't hear it at all.
Yeah, it wasn't terribly. I've got to say, like Matt, I didn't watch it. I was on the computer. I had it up in the corner of the screen so I could keep an eye on when it was about to come up. And when I thought it was about time, I sort of went through to the other room and watched it on the main telly. So I didn't see a lot. But Jason Manford, I don't think he looked terrifically comfortable, but I don't think Mel Giedrich was really helping, because she was like so overdoing it. I think she was putting him sort of slightly uneasy. And so, yeah, you're right. When the announcement came, it was just like this really weird moment where for a few seconds you couldn't really quite tell what was going on, could you?
No, not at all. You know, it was standard coming out of the top. It almost felt like one of those 80s announcements, which were almost just press calls.
Yeah, it was weird, wasn't it?
Strange.
And then it was taking place on Children in Need in front of all these people, and literally she just walks out of the TARDIS to say hello. Are you excited? Yes, I'm excited. We've not started yet, so I don't actually know anything about it. And that was about it, really. It was weirder even than some of the things they've done in the past, where at least with Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi, you got context. For this, it was like
She's also too young, presumably, to remember anything other than Capaldi onwards.
Well,
maybe the end of Matt
18 or something, yeah.
So she's born just before season 1 was transmitted, like a year before that. So she certainly won't remember Eccleston, probably won't remember Tennant.
Well, not only that, but she's been working on Coronation Street, so chances are she's probably not watched an awful lot of telly altogether. She might not ever really seen much Doctor Who at all, frankly. But then that, to me, that's a recommendation. If they've not seen the programme, then they're not going to try and do what they think they should do, but they're just going to do what feels natural instead, right?
Absolutely.
We'll talk about her as an actor in a minute, because as I said, I've seen a fair enough amount that I could say a couple of things. But Matt, you're talking about how she struck you on the stage.
No, I was gonna. So what struck me was the kind of the slight, a bit of reaction against somebody from a soap opera being cast as a companion, forgetting that obviously Jenna Coleman came from Emmerdale. But it's
Mandip Gill came from Hollyoaks, of course, as well. Yeah.
And it strikes me that actually, particularly for Russell T Davies sort of script, and actually for the companion in general, the soap opera is a perfect place to cast an actor, because they've got that kind of acting muscle of playing a perfectly normal person with normal concerns. And obviously they're solid actors, they're good actors, so that they can then develop into sort of weirder acting styles as Doctor Who necessitates it.
I mean, of course, being on a soap opera, you do so much day in and day out that actually you can sort of lean away from that to do something like Doctor Who. You record probably slightly less, but you're used to the workload, so you're not going to be put off by that.
So it makes perfect sense to me what John was saying about Ncuti Gatwa coming from sort of more niche series like Sex Education and the Barbie movie or whatever. And we're not knowing that much about him, but he's a more mysterious character, so he gets the Doctor role. And then the person whose name I immediately don't know.
Mel Gibson.
Mel Gibson. She comes in from this sort of soap universe, and that kind of that seems to be the ideal way of casting, unless you're Billy Piper, and you've come in from wherever Billy Piper came in from, music world stroke Shakespeare.
But clearly also Billy Piper was a very well-known face and name. And I'll come back to that, because I think there's something to be said about that. I mean, also, just before I do, because I'm not going to come back to this, do you think we're going to get a cameo from Rose in the specials? It's Russell T Davies. It's David Tennant. I think there's got to be, hasn't there?
There's no reason why not.
I mean, let's face it, Russell T Davies, wherever he left the characters doesn't really make any difference. If he wants to bring him back, he will. So I imagine there'll be a little bit of Rose at least. Millie Gibson then. John, do you want to something that I saw being said in a couple of places was about her, and the word they used was energy. I think what they really mean probably is presence. When she came out, she's got a good sort of presence. She's not... She doesn't draw the attention to her in a way that sucks the sort of attention out of everything else. But at the same time, she's got this nice presence where you notice her. She doesn't sort of drift away into the background or anything. She had a good presence from what I would be looking for.
I would say it's the same thing that Billy Piper actually had. Yeah. Because you would pay attention to her, but she never overtook the things in the way you'd say Tom Baker overtook the whole series in the 70s. And I'm going to be really interested to see that dynamic that she has with Ncuti Gatwa, because you can tell from Ncuti Gatwa's interviews, from clips, from if you've seen Sex Education, the guy has a really energetic style. I'm going to love seeing how they're going to bounce off each other like that.
And obviously, just on that point, they obviously did the auditions together so they could see who would have the chemistry and the energy with him, and that's clearly what's worked for them. So they could have cast anybody, but they've chosen Millie Gibson, and clearly the reason they've chosen Millie Gibson is because with Ncuti Gatwa already in place, this is the one that worked best with him, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing I was watching the Coronation Street, her character is not a nice person, I would say, particularly.
She's a person who life's been done bad to.
Yes, and she has reacted badly to it. But
there was more to that storyline than you think.
Yeah.
So I might go back into that.
Hints of, but it's even when she's being unsympathetic, she's got something. There's something there, vulnerability. And I watched the sentencing scene at the end where she doesn't have a line. She's just doing everything with face and body. I thought she was fantastic in that as well. I was really genuinely impressed with her.
Yes, in Coronation Street. And like I say, I was just sort of in and out of the room, and I wasn't watching, but I caught enough of the storylines and caught enough of her. And yes, very impressive. She's playing a character who I think fell in with the wrong crowd. And then the whole sentencing thing, which you perhaps don't know, is that she was framed.
Yes.
So, yeah. So she had to play a character who was going to prison for something she hadn't done. And so that's sort of 2 layers of characterization that you have to get behind in order to play that character and make it real. And she did all that, and she did, and a lot of other stuff as well. Every time I saw her, I always thought, oh, this girl's really good and she's bound for big things. I wasn't expecting necessarily that big thing would be Doctor Who, but she clearly was a major talent. And it was quite surprising to see her come out of the TARDIS and looking so different and looking glammed up. Just like I say, I didn't recognise her. And I wonder what they'll do with her in the TARDIS, whether they'll be leaning back towards that sort of, I guess, Rose-esque, not very glammed up characterization, or whether, you know, the thing with Ncuti Gatwa is he's quite sort of flamboyant. So you can imagine that actually Russell T Davies might go for, you know, 2 leads in the TARDIS this time who are a little bit more sort of not attention seeking, but just kind of a little bit more flamboyant. Because Rose, and especially Rose and Christopher Eccleston, they were very sort of dowdy, I would have said, in that first year, very down to earth and not very flamboyant. And it was in the characterization rather than sort of physical appearance of the characters. But I could see them going for something a bit more flamboyant this time around. Matt, have you any sort of expectations about how they might work?
No, but so I haven't seen her performance, and I'm sure she's going to be great because, you know, you don't get a prestigious job in television, you don't win an award, which she has won, without being great. And also, it's not. I don't think it's the hardest acting job in the world. I think you're, you know, it's very much a kind of intersection between soap opera and serious drama. You're sort of there, and it's a bit looser.
And also, there's a lot of reacting in Doctor Who, and reacting is a lot easier to do than pro-acting, as it were.
Yeah. My only hesitancy is seeing the promotion photographs of her and Ncuti Gatwa, very, very like Tennant and Billy Piper. And it seemed almost, and I think Ncuti Gatwa is more like David Tennant than, I don't think there's, from what I've seen of his personality, I think there's a lot of David Tennant in him, and there's a lot of Billy Piper in her, I think. And the idea that I'm a little bit hesitant because Russell T Davies is coming back, but we're sort of hoping that he's not just going to go back in time 15 years. We're hoping he's going to do something fresh. And at the moment, it seems more kind of retro, but that's based on one photograph and not having seen either of them perform in anything.
Well, and a couple of other things as well, but we'll get into that. Okay, let's talk about that for a minute. Yes, Ncuti Gatwa, I think, is sort of, and I hesitate to say this because it's not as if Tennant wasn't this thing already, but I think Ncuti Gatwa is Camp Tennant, really, isn't he? He's got the energy that Tennant had, and probably, you know, he's leaning slightly more into the sort of camper edge than Tennant was, but I don't think there's going to be that amount of difference between the two because Tennant certainly camped it up. So it's just a question of by degrees, really, isn't it?
And the feed-in series that Tennant did for Doctor Who was Casanova. So you've got a Scottish actor, basically, and Casanova was the campest of camp roles.
Yes.
So, I mean, yeah.
So there's not a huge amount of difference. I said in our thread when we found out last night, what did I say? I said, I wonder, because clearly Russell T Davies has gone for somebody who is not a million miles away from where Rose was, sort of young, pretty, blonde teenager type character, down to earth, perhaps working class or whatever we can imagine. Because, I mean, she was playing in Coronation Street, so that's what she was playing there. And assuming it doesn't sort of go somewhere entirely different with the character, you can imagine it'll be pretty much the same here. So, yeah, I was saying, it seems almost as if the companion is sort of the control element, and the Doctor would therefore be the diverging element, except the Doctor, like you say, is not diverging all that much. So to me, it looks like Russell T Davies is trying to capture that same gold that he had 10, 15 years ago.
And that's a slight concern to me. because I don't want to see. I think Russell T Davies's era was great and really popular, but I don't want to see it as being the safe ground, because Doctor Who has a lot of history since then and has changed and evolved and has just gone for a period. Whether you like his writing or not, Chibnall really pushed it with what Doctor Who could be and the shape of Doctor Who and the gender of Doctor Who, and I think that's been quite a progressive period. So for RTD potentially, and he hasn't done this, and we don't know he's going to do this. This is based on one photograph, but for RTD to see his second year as being, the thing to return to, I think I'd find that's the only thing I'd find disappointing. I think about
at
RTD.
The moment, yeah, and I completely agree. And I think at the moment, the impression we perhaps seem to be getting is that for every progressive element, there will be a slightly weightier retrogressive element. So in the specials, you've got David Tennant and Catherine Tate, which is extremely backwards looking, but then you've got Yasmin Finney. And while Yasmin Finney is definitely a progressive element, when you balance that against Tennant and Tate, the weight is with the retrogressive side of it. In the series, you've got, I'll just finish this point. In the series, you've got a ostensibly gay Black Doctor, but now you've got a companion who, for all intents and purposes, just looks like Billie Piper Mark II. And we'll get into what the name of the character is in a minute, but that's very retrogressive too for Russell T Davies. I want to come around to that, so we'll do that afterwards. John, you were going to say?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the thing is, I'm more interested in the setup of it, because obviously Rose back in the day was, it was very London centric. It was very London centered. Billie Piper put on a London accent. The Doctor for the second season got his London accent. I'm interested to see if Millie plays it in her natural accent, and if it's going to be kind of based up north, so to speak, have that domestic base. That would be the interesting thing to me, if they're going to kind of continue the Chibnall thing of taking it to the provinces.
It's Russell T Davies. I cannot imagine it won't be very Manchester centric in exactly the same way as that first series with Billie Piper was very London centric. I totally expect sort of lots of family, lots of Manchester.
I'd also sort of push back slightly on the idea that returning to Tennant and Tate is it is nostalgic, but it isn't regression, because it's a return, and it's the return that's the fresh thing. I think so. Oddly, yes. even though there are figures from the past, and I think there's a difference between regression and nostalgia.
But the thing is, Matt, I think you're thinking as a fan, and I'm thinking as the man in the street, the woman in the street who's just watching telly casually. All they're thinking is, oh, this is Doctor Who the way I liked it. And that's what I mean by retrogressive. Russell T Davies is gearing up Doctor Who to be something that's very familiar to the sort of casual viewer, with progressive elements, but like you say, probably less progressive than Chris Chibnall was, maybe. Do you want to have a couple of words about the name? Because they have given us the name. She's going to be called Ruby, which, given that we'll now have had two roses and a ruby from a writer whose nickname is Rusty, it is kind of, I put this out on Twitter, but most people listening or watching to this won't have seen this, but that is Terry Nation Tarrant territory, isn't it? Russell T Davies is at this point very definitely naming the companions after himself, I think. Well, and even if he's not, Ruby is almost designed to remind you of Rose, I think.
Remember the independent production company he's worked for the most as well. Is he taking some inspiration there?
Oh, Red
Productions. It's just Red.
Is it just Red Productions? I thought it was Red something. Yeah, no, you're probably right. It might well be. Yeah. So there you go. Because Rusty, what does Rusty mean in terms of colours? It just means reddish, doesn't it? I guess.
Yeah, and it's a kind of unusual surname as well. I don't think I've heard of many people called Sunday.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of sort of children's character names, and also very much in the sort of Amy Pond kind of wheelhouse. Oh, so I think it's
who's it saying they were both names are Rose and Ruby are names of the maids and upstairs downstairs as well. So whether he's pushing on that.
Oh wow. Could be. Matt, you were just going to say
no, something. I thought it's a silly name, but that's not actually a bad thing, because that's again pointing away from the direction of Russell T Davies having like a normal person who works in a shop as companion, and maybe to something a little bit quirkier and a little bit different. I've seen two variations of the spelling of Sunday. I've seen some maybe Wikipedia is spelling it like a ice cream sundae.
Yeah.
Hang on, it's on Russell T Davies put on his Instagram, so it'll be on there somewhere.
Yeah, the BBC themselves have gone with a Y with the day of the week ending.
Let's assume it's a Y then.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's designed to be a name that you remember because it's slightly unusual, but at the same time really normal. So it's not very normal as a name, but it's very ordinary words that put together in a name strike you as quite unusual, and I think that's the design behind it. Yeah, it reminds me of Amy Pond, I think, because you had Smith and Jones with Russell T Davies the first time around, and I wonder if you've seen what Stephen Moffat did with that slightly sort of fairy tale-ish, sort of slightly fantastical quality, where you've got characters' names that aren't quite normal and ordinary, and perhaps he's just sort of thought, I have a bit of that next time around, because you're right, that is a slightly odd surname. John, were you about to? Oh, go on. Sorry, no.
Well, I kind of hope so, because I'd like, what I want from Russell T Davies is for it to be a Russell T Davies series, but made through the lens of it having been the Stephen Moffat series and the Chris Chibnall series. So yes, to sort of acknowledge the best bits of those, because I think Stephen Moffat showed what different directions, and Chris Chibnall showed what different directions the series could take and what different textures it could have. And I think it would be a shame to kind of abandon all of those.
Yeah, and it's not like I don't think Russell T Davies has done that before. When he did Series 4, I'm convinced. I don't think I've ever seen this written down or said, but I'm convinced that when he did Midnight, what he was thinking was, what if I do the Stephen Moffat effort this year and see how that goes? And I think Midnight was very definitely Russell T Davies's attempt to do something that was like The Empty Child or The Girl in the Fireplace or Blink. Yeah. So I think that was the reasoning behind that. So it's not like he's not taking his inspiration before from other people. And from what we can tell about the big bad that's going to come at the end of the specials, that's kind of Stephen Moffat territory too, because I'm not a million miles away from what Stephen Moffat did when he brought back the Great Intelligence, potentially, is it? So it's hopefully it's Russell T Davies sort of broadening his palette. I'd certainly like to see his palette broaden, because I thought the first 4 series the first time around, basically by the end he was just telling the same story over and over again. Frankly, we'll see. John, did you? It seemed like you wanted to say something.
No, not at all.
You just had wind.
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe. Well, is there anything else then about her, about him, about them, about it? I think they're about to start shooting. I think they've done it a little earlier than they might necessarily have needed to, perhaps because it was Children in Need and that was a good opportunity. I think they start recording in like a week or a fortnight's time, from what I can gather, early December maybe. So actually
I'm sad that they're doing a winter recording, although presumably it was stretched on into spring, because I always prefer it when they make it in the summer, because I genuinely think bright and sunny location shoots, particularly in Wales, no offence, John, particularly in Wales, actually look a little bit more exciting. Having said that, presumably this is a series that goes abroad now. So,
well, of course, as well, it's being made by Bad Wolf, so
yeah,
that doesn't necessarily mean it will be in Wales. I'm assuming it will be, because Bad Wolf have got lots of connections there.
It'll be based in Wales, but
yeah, the studio will be there, but presumably for locations they can go to South Africa again. And
yeah, Bad Wolf do have their own studios down in Cardiff. Yeah,
are they in Cardiff?
Yes,
fair enough. Yeah, so perhaps it will. And of course they are starting in December or late November, early December, whatever it is, and it will probably be like a 9-month shoot, so it'll finish in like August or something next year, so there'll be plenty of time in the sun.
I mean, the other thing,
presumably they're starting with the Christmas special, so the Christmas special will actually be a Christmas special that's filmed at the right time of year for once. Presumably,
that's true.
First time ever, maybe.
And I think for all my fear that Russell T Davies is going back to a safe space, potentially in terms of the look and feel of the series. I am quite liking his return to the safe space in terms of him talking to Doctor Who magazine, him publishing like his little article in Doctor Who magazine. I really like that, and not in a nostalgic way. I found that quite reassuring, that it feels like something's happening. And I think Chibnall erred on the side of complete lockdown secrecy, which has its benefits, but I think the surprises probably weren't worth the secrecy a lot of the time.
Having said that, I'm at the point in my life now where I don't need to hear about Doctor Who all the time. I'm quite happy to wait for the series, frankly.
I think the allegation is Chibnall was told to pursue that policy by BBC worldwide. Who is it, or whatever they are now?
Okay. Yes, there was very definitely
there was a strategy,
sort of a suggestion that they wanted to pull back on things like the magazine, wasn't there? There was talk at one point, rumours going around that BBC Worldwide wanted to, or whatever they're called, wanted to get rid of the magazine altogether. Or there was suggestions
to take it in house. I think was
which would presumably have led to its ultimate demise. So it swung very much back around in the other direction. I think maybe in order to get his way about having a woman doctor, maybe Chris Chibnall was persuaded into certain compromises in other areas, and probably for the good of what was on screen, decided that the compromises for what was off screen were worth taking on. Yeah, so John might be right about that. Yeah.
Also, presumably Russell T Davies is a more powerful man
than
Chibnall. Yeah. He has more of a say. This is sold. I don't think when Chibnall took over, it was sort of sold necessarily on Chibnall's name, despite Broadchurch. I think Russell T Davies
sold on Broadchurch,
very much kind of, you know.
And of course, now it's being made by an independent company. So that independent company probably, I mean, whether it's written down in a contract or not, that independent company is going to have a lot more say about how the programme is promoted, especially during sort of off-season, as it were, aren't they?
And Russell T Davies is not going to be told how to publicise the show, because let's face it, from the last time he was on Who, he knows how to publicise a show.
Having said that, for all that bluster and for all those pages and pages in Doctor Who magazine, and there aren't going to be that many pages after this month, that was the sort of launch issue of Doctor Who magazine. And let's be honest, it's not like Stephen Moffat and Chris Chibnall didn't have issues where they were giving away sort of lots of behind the scenes stuff early on, especially when you were sort of naming companions or naming producers or whatever. They all did it. But Russell T Davies hasn't actually given us any details whatsoever almost about what's happening on screen. We know who, you know, the four main cast members are for the specials. We know that Miriam Margolyes has got presumably a very small part. We haven't been told, I don't think officially, that Bernard Cribbins is in it. I think it might have been mentioned when Cribbins died, but I don't think Russell T Davies has said it. We don't even know that. We don't know anything about any of the guest cast. We don't know where the episodes are set, apart from there's some stuff on Earth, and they'd have to be if Catherine Tate's going to be in it. So, you know, presumably there'll be a whole episode, at least maybe two, set on Earth, but we don't know. We don't know what the stories are called, what they're about, who the enemies are going to be officially. We don't know when they're going to be on. We don't know if they're going to be in a week together. We don't know if they're going to be, you know, spread across 3 weekends. We know nothing really.
We probably know slightly more about the actual Ncuti Gatwa series, because that's what he was talking about. We know that Daleks are back. I don't know if that's confirmed, but they were talking about.
I don't think it is even.
Well, they were talking about designing new Daleks. So.
Oh, somebody's. But I think it was said in a kind of sort of hypothetical sense. I can't wait to design a new Dalek, but not necessarily suggesting that he is designing Daleks for this first series necessarily, although, you know, obviously we're going to be expecting that, for sure. But yeah, I think Russell T Davies has done this big smoke and mirrors thing where he seems to have given away absolutely tons, and actually all he's really done is name about half a dozen executive producers, you know, and, you know, the directors, but really we know very, very little, and most of what we do know is sort of like from set reports rather than from Russell T Davies and Bad Wolf.
Oh, well, we do know the writer as well, obviously, of the specials.
Which is, but we you know, for all we know, and we wouldn't expect there to be, but for all we know, maybe the middle one was written by somebody else. Could have been, for all we know. I don't think he's absolutely 100% nail on confirmed that he's the sole writer for all three, although that's definitely what we would expect, and that's definitely been alluded to. But you know what I mean? It's not as if he's actually told us a great deal about what we can expect to see.
I think that's Russell T Davies's skill, but potentially Chris Chibnall either wasn't allowed to have or didn't have, which was Russell T Davies says a lot without saying a lot.
Yep. And let's be honest,
but he's very enthusiastic about it, and he does, that does work. It's infectious.
It's almost like the enthusiasm is the point, because if this guy is this excited about his own product, you want to watch it.
I wonder if it'll play slightly differently this time, because back when Doctor Who came back and we had this big enthusiasm from Russell T Davies, that was because we didn't know what it was going to be like. And even when sort of Tennant was cast, it was still fresh and new. So we were always sort of soaking up lots of sort of enthusiasm from the magazine and from the confidentials and whatever else. I wonder if this time, now that we've had it for 17 years, 18 and 19 years by the time we get Ncuti Gatwa series, I wonder if actually, and certainly for me, I'm a little bit worried that I might not get tired of seeing Russell T Davies by this time next year, and certainly by the spring of the year after, or whenever it's going to be. So it could play slightly differently this time.
Yeah, I think they'll be doling out the news, you know, in smallish chunks, but with the big fanfare, so to speak. That would be my guess. Keep it in the public eye, in a kind of a low boil.
Speaking of fanfares, do you think Murray Gold? Yeah. I only wanted to make a joke about John using the word fanfare and how to get it in, but you've spoiled it, Matt, so don't worry. Okay. Let's move on.
Well, presumably the costume is the next reveal, because if they're going to start shooting, there's going to be cameras, unless they're just shooting in a studio for 4 months and then they go out and do the location stuff. But
it could be
TARDIS interior?
TARDIS interior, yeah.
Yeah, TARDIS interior. It could be. Well, TARDIS interior the first time around, we didn't get to see until pretty much when the series was upon us. They kept that behind closed doors and didn't reveal it. Unless I'm completely misremembering, but I think we got a little bit of the TARDIS interior in that Adventure of a Lifetime trailer. But the first time we saw it properly was in the episode itself. So who knows? So Russell T Davies does keep secrets. Yeah, and as for the costumes, presumably she'll be changing clothes every episode, but presumably he'll have something, because that's the way they've been doing it. It's possible that he spends the sort of first episode, the Christmas special, mostly in Tennant's clothes and changes at the end, a bit like Tennant did when he did the Christmas Invasion, although he was in jammies rather than the Eccleston costume, but you know what I mean. And so it might be that the costume reveal doesn't come until like January or something. And actually, January might be a nice time to do the costume reveal. Let's say they shoot the Christmas special up until Christmas and then start with the series proper in January. Maybe January, just after Christmas, and you've not had a Doctor Who special over the festive season. Nice way to start the year by finding out what Ncuti Gatwa was going to be dressed as.
It's kind of that would be kind of different to what every other Doctor's done, because by the end of their first episode, they've decided on essentially the outfit that they're wearing. So I think it'll be revealed in that special rather than in the next one.
Shouldn't it be jammers, not jammers?
Jammies.
Jammies.
Well,
it's going to be Corro, but it's going to be jammies.
Corro. It's not Corro, it's Corra, short for Coronation Street. You don't say Coronation Street, do you?
Coronation Street.
Coronation Street.
Coronation.
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 No, Coronation.
No, Coronation.
Anyway, back to John's point.
The King's coronation.
Back to John's point, yes, but they presumably shoot him getting changed into his costume behind closed doors inside the TARDIS or in a set somewhere, so they don't actually need to reveal it until he's out on location in January recording episode 1 or whatever of the series proper. So they keep at the official reveal of it till January. That's what I would do if it was my decision and you were doing the special without him being in costume. I'd do the reveal in January, because it gives you a little perk at the start of the year when you go into the longest, coldest month, as it were. I think that's it. I There was something else I was going to talk about if we didn't keep going for very long, but we have kept going for very long, so I'll save that for another time. Unless either of you's got anything more you want to bring up, I don't think there's anything really. No, in that case, well, until we do this again, which probably will be in about 2 or 3 weeks when the next DWM comes out, I was JR.
I was Matt.
And I was John.
And we will speak again soon.